Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of What the Heys. Of course, I am your host, Heys Wolfenden. You might notice if you're watching this on YouTube, it's just me. If you're listening on something like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you won't notice anything different, it'll just be my voice. But I've decided to record a solo podcast for the first time in a few weeks, principally because I've got to keep using my. I've got a certain allocation of credit on my podcast host, and I need to use it. And at the moment, because of the new year as well, it's hard to get guests on. You know, I understand that people are busy and are doing their own thing, so I kind of feel a bit, you know, I'd feel a bit intrusive, basically, if I was to reach out and say, "Hey, can you come on my podcast?" when you should be with your family or want to be with your family. So I'm doing it on my own. But also, I thought I'd just give it a go, doing a video on my own. I've recorded short videos before. I'm talking a long time ago, like over 10 years ago, where I've recorded vlogs. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll notice I record a lot of videos now where I'm, of course, moving around and stuff and giving writing advice. This is obviously different. This is going to be the long form. Ideally, I think today I just want to do a briefish 45-minute podcast, and let's go from there. I think the first thing I want to kick off with today is, first of all, just to thank people for downloading and streaming my podcast, whether that's on something like I said, Apple or Spotify. There are many other sites that I'm on, of course, but then also YouTube. My YouTube channel over like December has really, really taken off. That makes it sound like I'm getting 1 million views a day. I'm not, but it's got like 60, 70, whereas in November it was 7, so it has started to grow. And I think the lesson for me there is never give up with anything that you're doing. This advice is to myself and it's to you guys. And just keep on putting out content, and just, you never know when it'll start to grow. But likewise, I think you can also get too fixated on stats. I definitely do. Oh, I'm growing. And then the next day or two, you're like, wait, no one downloaded my podcast, or nobody added me on Instagram. Maybe my videos are just a couple of hundred as opposed to a couple of thousand like the week before. I think that's life. I think sometimes you have to just kind of step back a bit and just go, look, at the end of the day, it will take care of itself. But I do believe the secret to certainly podcasting and, shall we say, social media-ing is you just got to knock out content on a more or less daily basis. And so this to me would be my big New Year's resolution for 2026 is all podcast related, is to maybe not give up, first of all, not to feel too down if guests cancel, for example, because that's, to me, it's the hardest part of the job now. It's like, I have set myself this goal, this aim, this target of getting a weekly guest on. Well, obviously I'm doing it now on my own. Like I said, I think there's a holiday reason for that. But sometimes people do cancel, and I'm human. You feel a bit down about that, and it can lead you to have to you have to reorganize things, because there's only so many weekends in a month, and if I have somebody booked down, at relatively short notice, I have to try to find a new guest. If I can't find a new guest, I'll do something like this, like I'm doing now myself. And the problem with this is, I'll tell everybody now, if you look on for my stats for my podcast, on my my main podcast site, and then YouTube, the interviews with video are by far the most successful compared to my solo efforts. Not that my solo efforts are bad. I just get it. I get that it's more interesting for people. So I think it's more interesting for people out there if I have guests on now. If I have guests that cancel, and if you're going to be a guest, I don't mind. If you've got something else to do, no problemo, dude. no problem. That's life. I understand that. I think it's just that when people give back word that said they were going to appear and there's no reason, it's just no, like that. Or another one is like not hearing from people. Just, hey. So I need, because like when I do my podcast, everybody, I need like things like promo photos and for the podcast. It all helps in marketing. It helps. I'm not spying on you. It's all to do with marketing. It's all to do with promo. It makes the podcast website, the episode, look better. And so I do need that. It really does make a huge difference for me to have that. And then things like brief bios, it's a similar kind of thing. It's if people are going to listen sometimes, they might want to, oh, who is this person? I think this is true for, any writer out there. You might be a traditionally published author that sells thousands of books a year, but maybe even tens of thousands. But still, most people would never have heard of you. So I think it is really good to kind of give me a biography. So I have to sometimes reach out for these things, and I think maybe some people maybe feel a bit put out by that, maybe a bit scared. It's like, but it's just all part of the business. And I do try to ask in as polite and as professional a way as possible. And by the way, everybody, you can always say no. I want if you don't want to give me a photo, or you don't. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. So just to say, for anyone listening to this, I'm always looking for guests. Always looking for guests. As I've said in a recent video, obviously, of course, like it's no secret, I want to promote myself, and to a lesser extent my books. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. But I also do want to talk to other writers out there like yourselves, and I want to promote you. I'll give a good example. I had a guest on 2 or 3 weeks ago now, Lieske. She's also on Instagram, and obviously she's on my show, and so people get to listen to that. People might buy her books, but more than that, to me, she seems like a really nice person, and she seems like a really energetic and keen writer. I see her stuff on Instagram. I share it. It's not just going to be that you're on my episode 1 week and that's it. I think I like the idea that, for me personally, I want regular guests. That's my aim. One of the aims for the podcast, in fact. Next week. We're in January now. At the end of the month, Travis Byram, who is my guest on episode 8, he will also be appearing. At least that's provisional. Part of me is also tempted to move him forward. I'm just not sure at the moment. But with scheduling stuff. And again, this is what I said before. The hardest part for me of doing my podcast is things like scheduling guests. I always worry that when I start recording with people that it's, I'm going to have no internet or something. Because I live in China and I need a VPN to access this app that I use. It's called Riverside. And I can't use it without a VPN. So, and it's the best thing around as from what I can tell. And I can download in things like 4K and 1K and stuff. So it's really important for me to have this. That's my big worry. But in reality, like I said, the actual conversation is so easy. And the best thing about it is, if you hear me now, I'm just talking. Round and round and round, going and trying to, thinking of things to write, trying to develop things. But when I do a podcast with a guest, where Travis was a great example, I just had to listen. I just ask a question, give him a prompt, and he talks at length. And I was like, wow, fantastic. And I will big up Travis, first of all, but his episode. I mean, it's something I've really come to. It's something I probably didn't appreciate at first about him. He is really well read. And it's something as like, because like he lives in Turkey now and I still live in China. We both used to live in China. And, it makes you realize the people you meet later down. That is actually quite exceptional. Yeah, he really is well read, and I think that is a good thing for writers to be. I think I describe myself as reasonably well read. I try to find time for reading. Yesterday I was reading this author A.L. Lieske's book, The Lattice Scheme. See, there you are, I'm just giving a bit of promo right now. And I was also reading American Gods by Neil Gaiman, but I was fighting for time in between, playing with my kid. But this is a lesson for writers out there when it comes to reading. I tend to think you have to fight for time. I think you have to make time, and it's a daily battle. I don't think it's a weekly battle. It's a daily battle. And if you're reading for just 5 minutes, you're just reading for 5 minutes. And you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll shout out to a few people that, of course, follow me or follow my news, shall I say, on like Instagram and Threads, especially on Instagram. There's a lot of poets on that group, and I think like poetry is great for this. You want to read, you've got 2 minutes, you can just dip in and out 2 or 3 poems pretty quickly. More than that, you can probably even have time to reread them. I tend to think with poetry, there's a big emphasis for me on rereading. If you really like something, or if you're not sure you understand something, you reread it. I'm really looking forward. I had Sarah James on, of course. Was it last week? I think it was just over last week, like 8 or 9 days ago now. And yeah, I was listening to her and I was enthralled. I was just, listen, I'll be honest, I felt like I was in like a university, I say tutorial, not a lecture, because maybe, lectures, it's not necessarily a personal affair, but I was just listening to her and like, wow, and like, just the energy, the enthusiasm for not just writing, but the writing business, the writing world. And I think it's something that maybe not all writers have. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's something that really came across to me. So it's great to have writers like her on, and like, again, poetry. And before I talked to her, I bought one of her first collection actually on Amazon, Into the Yell, which I really like. And then she, what was I going to say? She gifted me her latest collection, Darling Blue, which I read two or three times. I still continue to read it. And again, I'm finding like modern poetry very accessible. Like another example about reading is like, okay, I've got 30 minutes to read. I'm reading a novel, and I finish reading the novel or a chapter, say, after 20, 25 minutes. Well, I've still got 5 minutes. What do I want to do? Watch a video on my phone? No. I've got these poetry collections on my Kindle. I'll go into that. I'll dab into that. I'll read a bit, I'll read more, and I'll underline lines, and again, something I get from Sarah, and something I get from a lot of British poets actually as well, is like I love like the way the language can sound, and the way it's kind of framed, sculpted might be a better word, on the page. It's so again, for writers on my Instagram group, for poets on my Instagram group. Yep, really want to listen to you, really want to hear your stories, I've got to be honest. So yeah, 2026, New Year's resolutions, more podcasts. I'm going to, like I say, going to try and get as many guests on as possible. Listen, ideally, I'd like more people on, or at least a few people on from like literary agents or literary agents officers and people involved in publishing or marketing of books, because it's an aspect of the industry that I don't know enough about, and I should know more about, and I want to know more about. And I think that the people out there, the reading public out there, really want to know too. And me and Sarah James, we were talking about this last week, about querying. And you know you're good enough that you are getting a certain type of feedback that is suggestive to say, keep going, keep on, we like you, but I'm not the right agent for you, for example. What are words to that effect? And it is frustrating. But I think to a certain extent, we both don't know. There's like a magic spell if that makes sense. Or there's from fantasy, there's like a magic scheme, as in how the magic works, like the publishing world works in a certain way. And we know maybe part of it, maybe even most of it, but there's these little secret magic spells that we don't know. Like I was saying to Sarah, I think that when I wrote my first book, Jack Strong and the Red Giant, I sent it off to a bunch of agents, got rejected most of the time, almost got accepted, actually, on my first query, actually. Or should I say, first round of queries, but was rejected ultimately. But then what I did was I went away and edited it, and I took off 10,000 words. I made it a lot better. Just a lot better. Just really made it into what I would call a page turner, to be honest. And I still got rejected, but the messages I was getting back was, hey, you've already sent us this book and we've already rejected it. So, P.S., don't do this again. Like I say, I was explaining to Sarah James, I was like, well, yeah, but what I'm trying to tell them is, yeah, but I've edited it a lot, quite a lot. And I just want to show you my commitment to the process. I don't mind if you say to me, hey, we need to do some edits before the publication date. I'll go and do it. Imagine if you had someone that's like, no, do you know who I am? My name's Bob from Barnsley. I'm a local star here. I'm sure agents and publishers don't want to work with people like that. And I'm trying to say, hey, this is what I do. And they weren't interested. But the point I'm getting at is I sent it to Sarah. It's like, I think what they say yay or nay to is the premise of the book. The idea. I just get that impression. They think, yeah, you got problems with the book? We can fix that. Don't worry about that. But if these books are not being sold right now, we're not interested. Now, listen, I find that a hard one to kind of deal with. I think as writers, I think poets get this. I mean, I'm getting attracted back towards certainly reading poetry. I write poetry intermittently throughout the year. For anyone that doesn't know, and I tend to stay in my lane with poetry. I'll be honest. I take far more risks. I'm far more of a risky, inventive writer. When I say writer, I mean novel writer. And I'm always thinking ahead, like, what's my next book going to do? I need to do something different with my next book. With my poetry, I just write sonnets. I figured maybe it's because they like my short stories, and it's just like, well, I might be able to write at any given time a year. I want to say 2 or 3, but it's actually more. It's probably 7 or 8, 9 or 10. And it's like, well, I've got maybe 2 or 3 days to write one. I'm just going to write a sonnet. It's a form of poetry I've committed myself to for years now. I think I'm pretty good at it, but don't get me wrong, I still write sonnets. I'm like, I'm telling too much here. I can cut this phrase out, or these 2 phrases, these 2 that are repetitive, and I need to give it. I suppose what I'm saying is my sonnets, my poetry. There's quite a bit of challenge in there, and I'm building collections. I've got this I've published a collection on Amazon called Made in China. You can find it in the link to this episode. It's a hard collection to find, actually. If you just type into Kindle, sometimes it doesn't come up with anything. I think it's because there's several books called Made in China. But if you type in Made in China, my name, Heys Wolfenden, it'll come up. And there's like 50 sonnets on modern China. But I was like, when I published that, right, boom, it's finished. The collection's finished. And I've been working on these sonnets about modern China for a long time. I went to Manchester Metropolitan University with Sarah James, like I've said before. I've said that on a previous podcast, not on this one. And that's when I got into writing sonnets and writing about China, it's urban, modern China. And when I say I write sonnets, again, I know there's lots of modern poets on here. I try to kind of blend like modernism with, or a modern form of poetry with a more traditional kind. So it's a sonnet. It is slightly modernized sonnet. It's not really iambic pentameter. I use iambic pentameter as like reference only. I remember I think my old professor at Manchester Met, Michael Simmons Roberts. I can't remember if he said this exactly, so don't quote me. But he was like, yeah, oh yeah, you do. Like, you're not really doing iambic. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not trying to. Like, this idea that I think the sonic form as well can be really changed a lot. But to be fair to him, he noticed I was doing like 4 beats a line, not 5. And I'm like, oh, is that a mistake on my part, or is that something that is it because I don't know enough about the form, or is that something I'm doing maybe not intentionally, but like kind of like on a subconscious intentional level? And I think it does tend to be the latter. And maybe that's the answer why I keep writing sonnets, because I haven't mastered it yet. I haven't figured it out completely what I'm trying to achieve. And so yeah, I wrote these poems, 50, published, and right, done. And then a year later, I'm writing more sonnets about China. And so there's 50 sonnets available. These are the best 50. But I've got a file of another 75, 80 on. So the actual number of sonnets for Made in China is about 130. I don't think that would ever see the light of day as a full collection. I'm very wary of, like, go back to like music. You have a really good album with lots of tracks, and then suddenly the band starts putting in some fillers. I don't want that. I want them all to be of a really high quality. I think, to be honest, I'd like it to be a good round number. 50 is a great number. Even like 60 sounds odd. 70, 75? I think it'd be 50 or 100. I think would be the idea. I'm also writing another collection at the moment, just started re-editing it. And this is something I've been dabbling in for years as well. It's tentatively called Kill. And that's just because there's a sonnet called Kill. And it's very like nature and like environmental, like awareness orientated. So for example, the poem Kill was based upon this photo, I think it was in National Geographic, with these Inuit that shot and killed a polar bear. It's legal. And it's all about that, you know. Which is, and it's, I suppose it's a bit grim, but I try to explore these ideas of like environmental chaos and environmental catastrophe. And there's only about 20 sonnets, it's not much. And I've just started editing it again yesterday. And I also wrote a poem, a sonnet. It was actually about the UK. I've been walking in the woods last summer, and I saw some deer. I was seeing quite a few deer actually in the UK last summer, going into woodland Monday to Friday, 7 in the morning. It was maybe easy is too strong a word. It was predictable. And it's fantastic. And it's something I hadn't really experienced as much before in that local area. It's Halifax, if you want to listen. If you want to check around the area, it's like, wow. I was going down the motorway. This is to the airport, to Manchester Airport. And it's broad, brilliant sunshine, right, on the moors. And you're going down the motorway. And I'm just looking out the window like safari. Something else I'll talk about. And I see some standing deer on the moors, just eating grass or whatever it is they eat. I'm like, I've never seen that before. You can tell the number of deer is really going up. I mentioned safari. I'm a big believer in safari. I don't mean it like, I think the actual Swahili word means like kind of to go out and look. And I tend to think that people should do that. Safari is not necessarily going to Africa, going to Kenya. Then you've got Indian safaris where you go and look for, say, tigers and elephants and stuff. I don't mean that. I mean, you just go out and just pay attention to what you see. Might be trees, might be plants, might be, especially birds in the UK. There's quite a few of those. I do a lot in China, I suppose. And so I'm getting to it is that, so I wrote this poem called Breathe, and it was about like just taking time to soak up things. But a little bit of my like modernist like influences like Ted Hughes was coming in. It's like, but you've got to understand, but nature is violent. The blackbird sounds beautiful, doesn't it? And it shoves worms down its throat, like it's just an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. It's not good for the worms. It's great for the blackbirds. And I think sometimes when we write nature poems, we also have to understand that and accept that nature has a savage heart. Right, I don't know if you've noticed so far, we have gone down some tangents. I was talking about 2026 New Year's resolutions, wasn't I? Like I say, mostly podcasts. For writing, I typically write a book a year. I say typically, I've been doing it for years. And that's maybe why I always try to do something a bit different. I'm going to write a book. I'll start it middle of February. I've got a holiday coming up, first 2 weeks of February. When we come back, I'm going to crack on. It's going to be, I write first person narrative, but it's going to be like I won't say diary form, but it's going to be like a mission log. So it's going to be about this Indian girl on Mars in a future Mars mission where she's like these like colonists, like, you heard of Elon Musk's plan to have, like, a colony of 200 on Mars. She's going to be part of that, and she's going to have to write the mission logs. It's not her voluntary thing, and it's about her relationship with her family. There's going to be a figure there, maybe a bit like Elon Musk, who's going to be quite tyrannical, believe me. And it's going to be about, like, the idea. Premises is like, it's about Mars, about her, like, her family, her heritage, and then, but she's going to this new place, and it's Mars, and she hates it. Like a lot of young people hate going to a new place, because she's got no friends, and it's partially based on someone I know who's not Indian, but another nationality, actually, not British, not American. I'm kind of place her there. And what else was I going to say? And then the idea is that, like, there's lots of debates in the scientific community about, are the volcanoes selective on Mars? Well, you're going to find out in the book. Okay? I always write books, right, when I know the ending. When I know the ending, I mean, of course I know the beginning and I know the characters and stuff as well, but I need to know the ending. I've got several books. I know the story. I know the beginning. I know the main characters. Heck, I want to write it, but I don't know the ending. And I'm like, yeah, I don't start books. I think it's the kind of person I am. I like to, like, if I'm traveling, for example, like, I plan where I'm going. I know everything. And I think it's the same for novel writing, to be honest. So yeah, I know the ending for my Mars book. So I'll start doing that. I don't even know if it's going to be that long. I don't know, because it's first person, and because I don't write usually any other character's points of view. That tends to limit my word count. It's something I've noticed. It's like my last book, just 47,000 words. It's quite short, but it's one first person narrative. But I'm a big believer in, you can write short books and you can pack a lot in. I mean, of Mice and Men. If there's one book I recommend to anyone to read, if you have not read it already, read Of Mice and Men. Second book would be The Great Gatsby. They're short books, and there's so many great characters, a great story, great description, themes, agendas packed in. And that's why those two books will last. I do recommend, read those books. So I think I've been influenced by like John Steinbeck and Hemingway as well, quite a bit in terms of book length. But my style is, very young adult, modern young adult writer style, albeit with a little dash of George Orwell, maybe. Big believer in having, like, an agenda and themes. Big believer that, when you start writing a book, you have something in your mind. Like I mentioned about this Mars book, and it's of course it's about, I want to place myself as a writer and you as a reader in Mars, on Mars. But yeah, in Mars. I want it to be around you. Okay. But I'm also thinking about, like, the role of, like, kind of big tech, and, like, how, like, we pride ourselves, of course, in the UK and the West about things like democracies and stuff. We're free, blah blah blah. Say what we want. Yeah, sure. But if we take 200 people from our planet and put them on Mars, will democracy thrive, or will it start to be eroded by people who have and can wield a lot of power? I tend to think the latter. I think it'll be and that's what's going to happen. It's going to become a bit cultish. So yeah, I love my themes. I love thinking about how how these can manifest in the book. And that's what I'll do next year. And I write a few poems, and I'll do some blog posts. I do blog posts, which is like say basically how to write, which can sound a bit, a bit silly. Is that the word I'd use? Silly, but I call it how to-y as my adjective for it. But you'll be surprised how many writers don't read books, or don't edit their own work. Or I think there's a current one. It seems to be a thing on Threads, so it's probably the same on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter X. I find it. It's not really about Musk, actually. I think it might have been originally, but it's just about. I find it a very odd platform for a technological platform. It's always asking for phone numbers and all this stuff, and it's like, text should just be easy to in and out. I've got an iPhone, right? So I'm not anti-tech, but it scans my face to sign in for things. Come on, like Twitter can't do that. Like it's always asking for phone numbers. I forgot what's wrong now. I've got 2 or 3 accounts. One of my accounts was stolen, and I tried to get it back. This was after it must took over. Nothing got done. Nothing got done whatsoever. And it's just like whatever. It was just obviously I was talking about riding and football, and suddenly I start talking about cryptocurrency. Like what? It's obviously been hacked. I mean, it's stupid. And some of my friends have said that. It's like this is just nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So I'm going to go into things like that. What else? Oh yeah, so yeah, how to we? Yeah, I think it's good. I personally, when I write an article on a blog, it makes me think about my craft. I think it's a good way to kind of get my message out a little bit as well. But I want to move on now. I want to move on about I wrote a blog post about this, but just about my writing routine. I think it's important. Sometimes I will give very general advice, which will go something like this: write every day, or write most days. Finish your project, and these are all very good. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe sometimes people need to everything needs to be personalized. Everybody needs to kind of take some general advice and make it specific for them. And so if I give you my writing routine, it might give you an idea that, well, how do I accomplish writing every day or writing most days? How do I do that? So I'll start with what I do at the moment when I'm writing a novel. Because I've got a very young kid, and I've got my school that I work in is quite far away. It's like 45 minutes down the road. So I have to write on the bus to school, okay, in the morning, and on the bus back in the evening. And that equates to about an hour at the most. It's about an hour a day. And I've got my computer and the bus. I gotta be honest, if you can see me, it's like makes me car sick. It's horrible. And it's shaking up and down, in the words of my kid, wibble wobble, wibble wobble. And I could say, I'm sorry, I can't write like this. I need my quiet time at my desk. Yes, I would prefer to have a quiet time at my desk, but my life right now is not set up for that. And so it's either I adjust and write my buck, in this old-fashioned way, or I don't, and I'm just reading, and I'm not writing for a year or 2, maybe longer. And I'm a big believer in you got to keep it sharp, keep those writing skills sharp. The more you write, or the more regularly you write, the easier it becomes. It becomes like breathing. It becomes like an extra limb, so to speak. And so that's what I do. And then like I said, I don't write very long novels. That's the first draft done. I wrote, it was 40,000 words. I actually added an extra 10,000 to this novel in editing phase. So I think I wrote it in 3 or 4 months, or about 3.5 months, just every day. Plus, and then, the weekend, I was doing Saturday morning, wake up, sat at a desk, just writing again for about an hour, hour and a half. And then on the seventh day, I created the earth. Now, on the seventh day, I go out and hike, I explore a part of China, a part of Chengdu, the city where I live in, just for a few hours, just whilst my kid's still sleeping, so he's not like missing me or my time. And that gives me ideas for writing, maybe maybe poems, for example, or maybe just what I see filters into the book. Like, for example, like my current novel, it's set in the future where you've got all these like giant megafauna running around. I got the idea for that actually from living in this city of Chengdu, because like a lot of places in China, not many people know this, but like 2,000 years ago, there's like elephants around here. The type of elephant's now extinct, unfortunately. But there was elephants here, and there was always other bigger animals, and the big crocodiles. And so once I was aware of that, and of course I'm walking around the modern city, I started to think, well, what would happen if they all came back, and how would that happen, and blah 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 blah. And so that's how experience can really impact and feed into your work. Now, I'm not writing about past animals here in an explicit way. I'm just letting it feed into my work, which is something that I've done for a long time now. I suppose I write quite obviously about China for poetry, but for novels, I tend to it's all about experience, and it kind of feeds into it like a baker putting, I don't know, flour or salt into the dough or something. That's how I view experience. So that's that, and then so then what I'll do is I'll take. This is what Stephen King recommends, and I stick by it too. Take a 6-week break. It might depend upon the time of the year. Like if I've got, say, a holiday coming up, and then of course I come back from the holiday, I probably will start editing straight away. But typically it's between 4 weeks and 6 weeks. I think the longest break I've had is 8 weeks. Now in that time, I'm not, playing with my phone, doing whatever. I do try to relax, don't get me wrong. I think it's important to let your brain relax, but you still need to do other things. That's when I tend to do things like poetry, and I tend to write more blog posts. I might edit a project. I might edit some things. Like, for example, I think it was last year, I edited my Made in China collection again. For example, I've got plenty of books in the past that I've written that I'm a big believer in this, is that yes, you write your book, you edit your book, but I think it's always good sometimes, especially if they've been rejected, to go back years later and edit and read it again. And most of the time, you're talking, I want to say typos, but it's going to be a bit more than that. It's probably like, I just recently realised, I wrote this book called Dragon Rider years ago, didn't get accepted for publication. I haven't re-edited it, and I just noticed a while back, my main character is called Danny Moo. At first I thought it was a typo, and then I'm like, that's a terrible last name. Terrible. And it was, I think I was thinking about an old school friend of mine at the time, and which makes sense until it does not. So that book is something that I've been meaning to re-edit. It's only 40,000 words. I've been meaning to re-edit that for some time, and I might re-edit it at the end of, I was just saying, end of next year, end of this school year. So maybe in like May, June, I might edit that. I also might not, because my Jack Strong books, which is my was it magnum opus? Was that magnum opus? This is my big project. These are my Harry Potters. There's 5 books in the series, and I wrote them some time ago. I've edited the first book quite a few times, but books 2, 3, 4, and 5 haven't had the same kind of attention, and it's something I'm aware of. I'm aware of maybe repackaging it maybe redoing the cover art and stuff. Maybe like, I don't know, I might call it The Adventures of Jack Strong 1, Jack Strong and the Red Giant, and 2, go on like that, or not. It was always called like the Jack Strong Chronicles, but it sounds a bit too adult for me. And this is kind of the point I'm getting at. You're never going to be perfect the first time you do something. You have to go back and edit it later. So going back into my writing routine. So yeah, in these 6 or 8 weeks, I write other things. I edit other things. I try to read more as well. I'll typically try to catch up on a bit more reading. Then I'll start editing the book. And again, that last, I tend to believe whatever time you put in to writing your book, it should be approximately an equal amount of time for editing the book. So it'll be about 3 or 4 months to edit my book. And I've heard different ways of doing this. This is the way I do it. I start out really fixing language, grammar. I want to say typos. There's always a lot more than typos. It's just a minor thing. I start by doing all that stuff. And it's later on in the drafting, I'll look at plot and characters near the language is fixed. But I've heard other people do it the opposite way. But I find I can't read the story if I'm spotting bad mistakes in language. And I feel like I need to check that first. That's my rationale in any case. So I do that, and then I send it out to beta readers for feedback. It's something I did with my first book, Jack Strong, and it's something I admit I fell out of the habit of doing, and I think that's a mistake. I think sometimes the problem with beta readers can be sometimes you can wait a while to get feedback. That's probably one of the disadvantages. But the advantages are that you get another set of eyes on your prize. And I've already had a bit of feedback that I'm definitely going to action. Just wait to get a bit more and things like that. So yeah, that's what I do. I send it off to the agents. I tell you what I might do though. Like Sarah James is recommending, send off to 6. Like create like a table, send off to 6, maybe every month, every 3 months, and then query another 6, and then go on and go on. That might be the right way to do it. I tend to get burnt out. I tend to think that I should be querying more. I query the UK agents a lot, like everything I do, I query them. I feel they know me. They'll know me at some point. They'll, or some will know me reasonably well. Whereas I should query America, but I don't, because I know they won't know me, and it's like I feel like I have to build up that kind of, what's I want to call it, like that kind of like respect. That's not really the word I'm looking for. Like kind of like profile is probably a better word. Oh, this is this person. This is the kind of things they write. This is what they send. We know they're a good writer. We know they're a committed writer, but we haven't quite found their idea yet. But if someone doesn't know that, I don't know if that has bothered in me as a person. So that's that. And then and then what do I do? Then I take a 6 weeks break, and I do some more writing of things like poems and stuff, and then start writing another novel. One thing I'm going to say about writing routine though is like I'm going to switch back. So like from so my kid now started going to bed a lot earlier than he has before. So I'm going to switch to writing at home for my next novel. So like middle of February onwards. And this is another point about writing routine. Again, don't get set into a fixed routine. I mean, look, it's great if you can be in a fixed routine, but don't let the fixed routine dominate your output. If, for example, if you just say you get successful as a writer and you're doing a book tour, I don't know, all across America, all across Europe, and you're not at your favorite desk and you can't write, so you say, I can't write now. I can't write until I go back. That's an excuse. You get into that habit of writing in different places. Maybe this is something. Maybe this is my poetry background coming through. I think poets tend to have always had the habit of writing in different places, writing in different mediums. I wrote a poem the other week on my phone. I prefer to write in a battered notebook, any old battered notebook with a scrolling biro. That's what I prefer to do. but the situation dictated that I wrote on my phone. And in fact, I could have waited. I could have waited and written in my notebook. But I was like, no, I think I want to write this now. I think it was an idea I'd got. I went on a holiday recently for 3 days, and I was on the train. And I love in China looking outside the windows and looking at what's going by. And I'll take photos too. And there was all these gravestones, like tombs, in fact, on these mountains. And I was like, oh, there's a story there, you know. There's a big story. Then you got these big windmills and like the idea of like civilization creeping closer and going to erase these like mountain communities. And I wrote the poem, and whether it's any good or not, I don't know. It does need editing for sure. So there we are. You've got to be prepared to change and adjust. I think as well, another thing I would do recommend is always, as much as possible, finish what you're doing. Finish your projects. When I hear of writers, I'm not listening. I'm not condemning you. People are different. I always say, don't judge, observe. If people start one project, abandon it. People, know this. Start one project, abandon it. Start one project, abandon it. And you have a lot of what you've written. A lot. You've written your 2,000 words a day, but nothing's finished. It is about finishing the project. I think it's about bringing things to a conclusion. I don't know about like if you're writing and you're getting stuck, there might be a problem with the idea. Like you heard me earlier, I don't start writing until I know what happens in the end. That might be your issue. It might be that you're writing something you don't know the ending of. I do recommend, this for me, it works for me, knowing the ending. So you could try that. I'm a big believer in an outline. And when I say an outline, it's rough. Well, how rough is rough? 3 or 4, 2 or 3 grammatically incorrect paragraphs. That's all I do. And I know the main character or main characters. The rest I make up as I go along, and I think that's fun that way. But I also do hear of people. I think sometimes, like, I think I'm some. What do they call it? They call it there's outliners, which is obviously write a very detailed outline, and there's pantsers. Pantsers means like flying by your pants. What do they call it? Flying by the seat of your pants. Where basically you just start writing. Maybe you got a premise. Boy wakes up, lost in the woods, surrounded by vampires. Boom. What happens next? And they write the novel. Okay. I think. Listen. I think any. And I'm in between. By the way, I think any of those, both of those are fine. But at the end of the day, it's got to work for you. So if you're a pantser and you're not finishing your book or your story or your poems, there's something wrong with your what do you want to call it? Your regimen, your philosophy, and it goes for the other way as well. If you're an outliner, maybe it's boring. Maybe it is boring. Maybe it's not interesting to just completely sketch out. A novel, chapter by chapter by chapter. I think it's boring to do that, but I do like to sketch out somewhat. And then another thing I do as well, by the way, for chapters. Before I start writing a chapter, I always write very briefly what I'm going to write about. 2 or 3 sentences, again, grammatically incorrect, just blah, 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 blah. And again, I find that helps me. It gives me a guide to where I'm going to. And by the way, I might write, boy, wakes up in the woods, surrounded by vampires. They jump on him and eat him, for example. That's just the rough one. And as I'm writing it, the story takes over. The characters take over. He doesn't get eaten. He's running away. Falls off a cliff. Boom, darkness. Where is it? And it's things like that. That's the magic. I tend, like I say, I think you've got to find that blend. You've got to make sure whatever you do, you complete your project. That's what I would say. Right, I'm going to end it here. Okay. So I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you today. Please carry on checking out my podcast. In particular, I do recommend the interviews. They're the ones that are the highest rated on things like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube. So episode 5 with Eric Jong, episode 8 with Travis Byram. This is where you're testing me now. Episode 10 with Ariella Gibson. Episode 11 with A.L. Lieske. And episode 12 with the poet Sarah James. There we are. I didn't get any of them wrong. Okay, so until next time.